Maya Plens from the UN Brief. Maya, over to you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Director General, Mr. Ryder, it's a pleasure to see you. My question is related to the fact that how are we shaping the future of social protection? You mentioned that there is insufficient administrative capacity. And my question is related to artificial intelligence on the delivery of services. As we have already observed in the US, several technology companies coming to help design and deliver services to unemployment services and other sort of social protection floor services. And that is detrimental many times to the beneficiaries of these services. So what in your research has pointed to the fact that how we develop this administrative capacity in this new framework where technology plays such an important role? If you could comment on that aspect.
Thank you for the question. I think you touched on some really critical issues. You know, as you will see from our report and the recommendations that we make, we talk of this high road towards universal social protection, a goal already established in the 2030 UN agenda. Now, it seems to me that you've got two, I run the risk of oversimplifying here, but there are 2 points here. One is investment. I've talked about underinvestment that was obvious in the situation before the pandemic and all the consequences that flow from that. So there is a major financing for development part of this story, and I would break that down to financing for social protection. We simply have to mobilize more resources nationally and internationally and devote them to social protection. We've talked about the financing gap. But your question points perhaps to the other possible deficiency and real deficiency in many countries, and that is deficiencies in administrative capacities. Now, technology is a part of that solution, I would argue. Not the whole solution, because you need the right types of institutional frameworks, you need the right types of regulation, you need the involvement of workers and employers in processes of dialogue. Don't forget, very often it's workers and employers' money that goes in to finance social protection systems. And my view is that technology can and should be a part of the solution. It should be part of the response. And we've seen that happening, and we've done quite a lot of work in terms of broad labor administration, public employment services, where technology is absolutely facilitating the interface between job seekers, for example, employers who are looking for people to fill vacancies, and public capacities. We've also seen how identity cards, electronic identity cards, are helping the rollout of social protection systems around the world in very impressive ways. At the same time, I think it's true that it is unwise to regard technology, artificial intelligence, whatever it might be, as the all-purpose, self-regulating panacea to any issues. We have to apply these technologies intelligently in ways that protect the rights of beneficiaries in the way that they should, and that serve the purposes of clearly established public social protection and other goals. So these are major challenges, but I repeat, I believe that technologies are very much part of the answer. But I'm going to ask Shahra if she's got some specific points to add to my rather general response.
Thank you very much. And to follow that, there's no doubt that technology has been used very effectively during this crisis to deliver benefits. We have examples, for example, from Togo, the Novici program, which used smartphones to deliver benefits to beneficiaries. But I think it's also really important that we, first of all, recognize that technology is part of the answer. You need other kinds of capacities, including administrative human capacities, which comes with having a capable and effective state to make the kind of systems and to sustain the kind of systems that are needed, as well as effective social dialogue to ensure that there is ownership and there is participation in the way in which systems are designed, and therefore public trust in them. I think that's very important to emphasize, because without that public trust, it's very difficult to get the kind of financing that is needed, whether it's through social security contributions or through taxes to sustain systems. But to go back again to the question of technology, I think we should also be mindful of some of the risks that may come with digital technologies. And there's a very good report that was prepared by the previous Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, Philip Alston, who has warned about the risks of double exclusion of people who don't have access to smartphones, people who are not digitally literate. And we know that there is also great inequality in terms of access to the internet. So these are, I think, issues that we need to be very wary of while using the capacities and potential of the technology that is available and has proven to be very helpful.
Maya plans at the UN brief. Maya, back to you, please.
Thank you, Martin. So my question is related to the comment on 77% of people of retirement age receive a pension, but that is insufficient. And in particular, women, because they raise children, they care for their elderly, they have less wages, lower wages throughout their careers. So what does ILO see as a possibility on helping countries, even developed countries, in developing policies, designing policies that take into account these factors?
Thank you for that question. Yes, in terms of the coverage that is provided, pensions do have, relative to other areas of social protection, one of the highest levels of coverage, the 77.5% that you said, as a global average, which of course, again, there are significant regional differences. But we also, I think it's also important to emphasize that coverage does not necessarily mean that the provision that is provided is adequate. And this is very important to emphasize in a context when many of the provisions that are available, particularly, for example, non-contributory pensions, social pensions, in terms of the amount that is available, it's not always sufficient to take the person and the household above the poverty line. So people could receive a pension and still live in poverty. A very important element here is ensuring the adequacy of the benefit and making also sure that it stays adequate over time, that its value does not decrease. So there's the whole issue of indexation, at least tying it to the price level, to inflation level, and or also to the average earnings, so that it keeps up with the average level of earnings in a society. Now, in terms of the gender dimension, you're absolutely right that many of the forms of discrimination and exclusion that women face in the labor market, because they have to exit very regularly, they often cluster more within lower paid jobs. They tend to also be more visible in informal types of work. All of this really conspires in a way to reduce their lifetime earnings and to deprive them of an adequate pension when they need to retire and have a life in dignity. So there are significant gaps in terms of women having access to contributory pensions. And sometimes in many countries, we have seen that when social pensions have been put in place, it has reduced the gender gap in coverage in terms of access to a pension. But the important point to emphasize also is that for women to be able to also have a pension through a contributory system, which tends to provide more adequate and higher levels of protection, we need to really make a difference in terms of how their pension system responds to some of the gender-specific differences that women have. For example, if in pension systems you have care credits included so that people are not penalized for time that they take out of the labor force to care for a child or someone else who needs care, that they're not then penalized by having lower pensions. This is a positive move, and this is something that many countries in Europe, but also increasingly in Latin America, are including in their pension systems. But I do also want to end with a note to say that when pension systems rely predominantly on individualized accounts, then the possibilities of having the kind of redistribution that you need within pension systems to increase the level of benefits of those who have relatively lower earnings will be reduced. And so we really need to emphasize the solidarity part of the pension system, the contributory system that can help those with low earnings, low wages, and those who have very irregular careers. And that is also a very important element in terms of being able to have greater gender equality in terms of access to benefits and adequacy of benefits upon retirement.